Great. Okay. Well, today I'm extremely honored to have Robert Bell with us. Robert is one of the co-founders of Intelligent Community Forum, and we will hear a lot more about that whole arena. But I met Robert 3 years ago because we put a little, we competed in the smart city competition. And even though we did not, we made the Smart 21. And even though we did not make the top seven, Robert, I think you were the one who got a hold of me and said, Fairfield seems to be a fascinating place. Will you come and talk about Fairfield at our international summit? And so I had one of the peak experiences of my life doing that. It was a blast. And it was so wonderful being with people from all over the world. The Bindong region of Vietnam actually won the top place. And Robert will talk about the how and why of the competition. Why do the smartest cities of the world? But the other big goal that I have is for us as a community to embrace some of the tools and some of the technology that ICF actually has. And I'll ask Robert to talk about that as we go along. So, Robert, take it away and you can fill in whatever I didn't say.
And I hope you're going to guide me along with some questions and comments as we
Oh,
go, Bob. 'Cause
absolutely.
I didn't really prepare anything for this. I figured you'd just be asking me questions. So instead, I'm going to use my telepathy powers and figure out what those questions would have been.
What might have been, right?
Um, So first of all, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you here. Fairfield is a very unusual place. I actually was just I'm in the process of revising a set of online training courses we call the Community Accelerator. And in the innovation section, I actually have a piece about Fairfield and what makes it unique among the small cities that we've ever studied. So you've got a lot going for you that a lot of places wish they had. ICF got its start a little over 20 years ago when I and two other gentlemen, Louis Zaccarilla and John Young, were working together on something. And we became increasingly concerned and interested in the fact that there was this revolution going on in how we connect. And this again, 20 this is back slightly before the century we're in now. So the word broadband didn't even exist yet. But it was very clear already that connectivity was transforming how our economy operated. Suddenly the ability to manage facilities, people everywhere on the planet from wherever you happen to be was going to be changing. It was going to be a life-changing and economy-changing event. It also, however, was going to change the place called home, the most important place in the world. And we've seen now in the 20 years since that playing out, right? Places that entered this century with good, strong internet connectivity, with a lot of universities located there, with money available, who are lucky basically for this new age, have done extraordinarily well. And a lot of other places have done extremely badly. And so we founded ICF based on the concept that if there's a set of new rules, let's figure out what they are and help communities develop their economies, which of course is the sort of foundation of everything else. If you don't have a working economy that's able to adapt to the continuous series of changes that we're facing, of which AI is only the latest, you can't have really a strong social network within your community. And I'm talking about a human to human social network. You're going to find that your culture, the thing that makes your place in the world unique, is going to erode. And it's going to be gradually overwhelmed by this global online culture. And if those things happen, you've lost your way, right? The things that make a city of any size, a county, a region great are the ability to prosper, to share that prosperity as widely as possible, to build on that foundation, this strong society, and to provide people with a culture that gives meaning to that place, meaning to their location in that place. If you have all those working for you, you're going to do very well in this century, which has so many challenges. And if you don't, you're not. So Over those 20 years, we began basically gathering a lot of information about how communities that seem to be doing it right do it right. And we did that in the form of an award program that Bob already referenced. And we discovered that if you promise people to give them an award, they will share information with you. And the information that we sought, we've refined it over those years, as you can imagine, is very detailed. We're looking for information about the internet connectivity you have, and is it affordable? Is it how far and wide does it spread in your community? What are you doing to try to fix issues that you have with it? As in, I've got parts of my community that are not covered. How am I going to make that happen? We look at the issue of, excuse me, the issue of education or workforce development, intimately tied with it. And what we discovered was that communities around the world that are doing this really well are taking a revolutionary approach to it. They're really rebuilding their education systems into what we've come to call the ladder to opportunity. It comes down to innovation. Ultimately, innovation produces 80% of all economic growth. A Nobel Prize winning economist proved that to the satisfaction of his economic colleagues. And it's one of those sort of fundamental facts that when you bump into it, you sort of nod your head and say, okay, yeah. But if you step back and think about it, what it means is that if you're devoted to doing the same thing in the same ways, you're losing out on 80% of the opportunities around you. Now, in a place like Fairfield, I probably don't even need to bother to give that speech because you are one of the more entrepreneurial places in America. But nonetheless, it's critical. And so what does that mean? Bob used the term smart city competition, and I have to beg to differ with him. We are in the business of intelligent communities with those three aspects that I talked about, because the smart city movement was invented by IBM and Cisco for a very simple reason. They wanted to create a market to which they could sell billions of dollars worth of stuff. And they did, good for them. And the cities that use this stuff have discovered that it saves money, it produces better level of services, and all those things are great. Our issue with it is, have you created any jobs lately from it? And the answer is no. It's all within the walls of government. It's all the things that government controls is what the smart city focuses on. We're interested in what happens outside the walls of government. So innovation, if I talk about innovation to a governmental audience, everybody nods their heads and starts talking back to me about the smart city. And I say, yeah, 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 yeah. No, the payoff is when you get the private sector to innovate. And of course, do by all means make your government more effective and more efficient. But that's not really where the victory comes. So that's three things I've named: connectivity, workforce development in a completely new way, innovation, creating an innovation ecosystem, which is a long, patient job that, again, Fairfield has kind of lucked into, but also kind of seen how good it was, how well it was going, and kept it going, which is the secret. But we also talk about three other things at ICF, because if you're doing all that, you are taking your community through changes, and sometimes very drastic changes. I think it's been more evolutionary in your community than otherwise, which is great because people hate change. They don't mind, they don't mind change that occurs gradually, that they have a chance to buy into, that they have a chance to shape. But when it gets dropped on them, nobody likes it. So the three things that we emphasize that intelligent communities do are, first of all, to focus really heavily on engagement. Now, in Fairfield, that's what you live and breathe. And you're of a size where you can do that face to face, person to person, over cups of coffee. As the government official in Mitchell, South Dakota said to me, there's not too many problems we can't solve over a cup of coffee, but you got to be able to drink a lot of coffee, which I thought was a pretty good comment. So when you get to be a bigger scale city, you have to find lots of ways to engage using digital technology as well. And there's a lot of great tools out there now. And there's great worldwide examples we have of cities doing kind of everything to engage their citizens so that they feel they have a voice, that they see their needs and concerns reflected in the policies that come out of government. And therefore are going to, rather than resisting change, are going to embrace change and see its value for them. We also are stress the whole issue of digital inclusion because again, no matter what we do, there are always going to be people in our society who are not going to come with us on this digital economy journey, right? It's just too weird. I can remember my father, who's now passed, but when he was turned 80, he said, I've been going down to the library, and this goes back a ways, and seeing those computers, and I thought about it. I decided I'm just not going to go there. I said, Dad, that's okay. That's okay. You, having served in the World War II on a destroyer escort in the North Atlantic, you've seen enough changes. Um, so digital inclusion is, it's about access to technology, access to connectivity. It's about training, and it's about giving people a reason. Because if you've never been online, we can probably all remember our first experiences of going online and seeing, wait a minute, this is a completely new thing, and wow, I can find out anything I want to know in 5 minutes or less. That's powerful. But until you know about that, it doesn't mean anything to you. And lastly, the sixth of what we call our intelligent community factors is about sustainability. For multiple reasons. One, it's about the place called home. It inspires people to be engaged if they do work on the sustainability of where they live, because it's going to be an enormous economic development opportunity. And you see that everywhere from, Texas to Massachusetts to Iowa, right? There's no question this is going to be a huge, huge growth market. And if it's probably not in your interest to ignore it. And ultimately, of course, we'd like to help save the planet, make sure that we can live on this little blue marble of ours. So, six factors. What we find is that when, again, we've learned this by doing, we've learned this by studying communities, by looking at all this information they provide us, and finding the patterns over and over again. Somebody asked me what we do, and I said pattern recognition is what we do. We look for the things that succeed and we repeatedly, and then we say, we've developed what we now call the community accelerator strategy, which puts all of that into some nice buckets. Because our mission, of course, is to help other places learn how to do this, and to be able to. And my job is done. It's never done, but my job is done when someone says to me, and usually an economic developer says, "We've been looking for something like this for like 3 years, and then I discovered you have it." And I said, "Yes, and please take it." Right? It's a set of ideas. Take it. We, of course, help in that process by offering services. So we have, as I mentioned, this online training set of courses. We'll go and you can take it yourself, you can take it in groups, you can catch up with examples from around the planet. And again, that's one of the things that I think separates us from a lot of other organizations. We have learned from every place. In fact, in many ways, this country that I love so much is pretty much behind the curve of things that are going on in a lot of other parts of the world, and in ways you would not expect. Not the tech. The tech, where we got lots of tech. It's all the other stuff that makes a community great. But nonetheless, those stories are incredibly inspiring as well as instructive. And what we do in those courses is to hopefully inspire, but also pull the lessons out and say, here's basically what they did. Now, how does that relate to what you want to do? Because we have this community accelerator strategy, but that's just a framework. The strategy has to belong to every community that does this, because every community is unique. We offer that training. We will come in and do an assessment for you. Now, Bob talked about filling out a questionnaire, and that's part of our award ceremony. But we'll also come in and you can just spend I think it's a couple $100 with us. We'll give you an assessment report from it and then walk you through what it means. Because again, we want you to learn from that, find out where you have some gaps to fill, and then suggest to you ways to fill those gaps. We will certify using the same set of standards that we've developed for our award program. We will certify places as intelligent communities. And we started that, I guess, a year and a half ago. We're starting to see some nice uptake on it. And that's an economic development lever, right? You're going to say, I got the stamp of approval from these people called the Intelligent Community Forum. It's something that you need to know about, inward investor, if you're thinking about coming into our community. We have the award program. It's always fun. We love to give awards to people. I always hate the fact that I can't give awards to everybody, but this is not kindergarten, where everybody gets a ribbon for showing up. Our next one is going to be this month. We're announcing our top seven in a city called Las Rosas de Madrid, just outside of the Spanish capital, being hosted by that city. It's going to be a pretty big event. We got several hundred people signed up for it. So I'm not going, unfortunately, but you can't have everything. Then after that, we're going to be going to Binh Duong, Vietnam, which is hosting our summit. We'll be back in the United States in 2026 with a Smart 21 event. We haven't got our top seven pinned down yet, but we're going to be in Central Ohio actually for 2026. So that's not that far away from Ohio.
No.
We can get some of you folks to come visit us. And lastly, there's membership. We have organizational memberships for companies. We have community memberships for communities. And the point of that is that you enter into a relationship with us. And by spending a little bit of money with us, it makes it possible basically for us to work with you closely, as opposed to being able being able to have the meetings like this, which we're happy to do. So we can connect you to other places. We can help you with economic development opportunities. We can help you, you've got a problem you're working on. We probably know people who've solved it before. So all that stuff contributes again to your development, saves you from having to invent every new solution yourself, allows you to steal from others and file the serial numbers off, and then it's yours. That's it. I mean, it's a pretty simple set of offers that we have. The connections among the people in our organization and our communities is really what makes it all run. I was just speaking, actually, just last week, I was out in Dublin, Ohio, where we have an institute. We have a set of institutes. I guess we're up to three and possibly two more before the end of the year around the world. And their job is basically to take this methodology that we've developed and help it spread within their areas as well. While doing that, making it very specific to the area. So the Institute in Dublin has just put on a big event in what they call the Beta District, where they've got a big test bed for connected vehicles. Some very exciting developments happening that, and the Institute's taking that thing that exists and beginning to push it out, throughout Ohio, and that this methodology for innovating and growing your economy, because Ohio needs it, because Central Ohio is very prosperous, and then they got a lot of areas around it that are still suffering, and so that's a very clear case of trying to push the envelope outward to take in more and more people. So I'm really excited about what they're doing, and I think I better stop for the moment and let my colleague Bob tell me what I've forgotten to say.
Well, this is really, really exciting. And the funny thing, I had a blinding flash of recognition of why do the competition? Well, competitions are fun, but how do you get the data that you all needed in order to find the patterns? Did
hmm
everyone catch that? That's hugely significant. That by doing this competition, you get a whole bunch of people who will provide on their own dime a whole lot of very, very detailed information about the community. Then there are the metrics of the community that are public record. And so putting those two things together gives this nonprofit institute the ability to come in and say, okay, here's the patterns that we've seen. You can have whatever thoughts you have about what should be done, but this is actually what works all over the world, whether it's Europe or Asia or Africa or wherever. Did I get that right, Robert?
You did, and you also remind me that I should be going into a little bit more detail there. So this process evolved over time, but it's now, I have to say, extremely rigorous. We have a what we call the assessment questionnaire, which is very much a check the boxes and write in the short answers, give us the statistics, let us, and on that basis, we're able to compare you very, very, precisely to our global data set of communities. And they're of all different, one of the things that confuses people a lot about us is they're of all different populations and degrees of wealth, right? And folks, we've had sometimes bigger cities say, "Well, I don't want to compete against Fairfield." I mean, who are they? They're
They
nobody.
lose, right? I mean, they're
Well,
afraid. They're afraid of us, right?
that's particularly what they don't want. But that to us, that's the whole point. We tried to develop, and we think we have successfully developed a set of strategic recommendations that apply to you pretty much wherever you are, with obvious limits. North Pole, not so much. And pretty much however big you might be. And again, there's limits. If you've got a population of 900 people, probably going to be hard for you to implement a lot of this. But you get up into the 7,000 range and above into Fairfield zone, all the way up to several million. The basic principles work. So following on that questionnaire that I mentioned, we then, if well, either if you were going through an assessment with us to be certified, for instance, or if you're in our award program, if you are one of the Smart 21, as Fairfield was, and I hope will be again in the future, you're going to fill out what we call the narrative questionnaire, and this is about storytelling. Because the numbers and the metrics are very interesting. They let us compare you, but they don't tell us how you got there. They don't give us the patterns. And so those narrative questionnaires are incredibly rich documents for us, and we mine them like mad, again, looking for the stories that show how a place got from stuck to successful, how it turned around a stagnant situation and began climbing that hill. And sometimes how they then kept going, they got successful. Now, how do you stay that way? Because if you're a very, very large city, that flywheel can run for a long time. You can be doing the wrong thing for years, maybe even decades, as we've seen in, for instance, Detroit. And then all of a sudden, it all falls apart. Smaller places don't have that luxury. And so they need to constantly stay on top of things. And then the final step in all of this is again the award program. If you're in our top seven, which is selected out of the Smart 21, we go and visit. We used to do it all ourselves. We now have a set of auditors who go out and do this. And that's the final check. First of all, we're making sure that you're telling us the truth, which is never really, well, twice has been a problem in 20 years. But most importantly, because when you go on site and you meet the people and you see the programs that you read about, what you see is something that can't be, it's very hard to describe otherwise, the connections among them. Because it's the connections that actually power change. It's when the folks on the ground realize that economic development goes hand in hand with education. And education is economic development. And digital inclusion is economic development because you're bringing more people into your workforce, right? And education is the same thing as engagement, right? So it's the connections you see among these things that power. It's a force multiplier, as Colin Powell put it, right? It's the thing that takes these separate little things that happen in silos normally in most local governments. And this, by the way, is worth talking about for a moment. I know Fairfield doesn't have this problem, or at least I don't believe it does, simply because your government is small enough that everybody wears lots of hats. But once you get into a larger scale government, people tend to fall into their silos because that's what human beings do. It's worked for us for 100,000 years, so why stop now? And of course, that's a problem when you're trying to get this cross pollination of ideas, cross pollination of effort, the realization that if I'm in economic development, I do need to be really connected to what's going on in education. Obviously, it's not my job. I can't deliver on it, but I need to know what's going on there and I need to be able to influence it. I need, for instance, to engage the employers I'm working with and say, here's what's going on over our school. They could really use you to come in and help them with this one thing, and so you're creating those connections. Um, so that has become our core process, and we put people through it. And there was a gentleman in the Netherlands who said to me, "I have two things to say about your program." I said, "Yes," and the Dutch are very direct. He said, "Filling out all that stuff and giving you all that information was the hardest thing I think we've ever done." I said, "Okay." I'm feeling a little bashful at that point. He said, "It was also the best thing we've ever done." I say, "Thank you." Now, other people may feel differently, but in their case, they went on to be the Intelligent Community of the Year in 2011. So there you go. What else, Bob?
Great. Well, I think you gave us a very, very good overview, and I think it's time just to kind of open this up to our audience. We've got economic development people here. We got political people. We got all of us here. Who has a question for Robert? Gregory.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. The mic.
So when you started, I guess you saw that transformation was due to connectivity over the internet. Now the word on the street is that AI is the transformational piece, and I'm wondering what you've thought about or experienced about AI in terms of how communities are preparing for the AI future.
Well, let's start with the caveat that nobody knows. But what our perception is, I guess I can say our perception is that, first of all, yes, this is going to be a very, very powerful tool. Um, at latest account, AI has, on average, a 27% hallucination rate. So,
Hallucination, right?
right. So, in other words, it makes stuff up 27% of the time. Not therefore a tool that, in my opinion, is ready for prime time, but okay, that's fine. It is incredibly useful. Generally speaking, this is one change and it's going to be big. It is going to be transformative. It's going to have it's going to have transformative effects on employment in ways that, you've probably read all the different possible scenarios, right? But generally speaking, the folks who are thinking, in my opinion, most clearly about this are saying we're basically going to be not necessarily wiping out a lot of jobs in the near term. What we're going to be doing is changing those jobs. And that in and of itself is a challenge because, what happened when factory workers were replaced by robots, right? Well, those who were able to skill up and understand how advanced manufacturing works had a future. Those who really just wanted to, work on the line and not invest in their future didn't. And that was a tragedy that we allowed that to happen. So jobs are going to change in their nature. There are going to be some things that are going to be positive. For instance, one of the near-term findings seems to be that for either new hires or people who are being moved into new positions, having access to an AI that can help them with things gets them up to speed a lot faster. Um, there's also, there was a cool story in the news recently about the fact that students are really ticked off in many of schools around America because they're not allowed to use AI because everybody's afraid they're going to cheat, but their teachers, they're using it like crazy, right? So jobs are going to be transformed by this, and so, but the pattern is the same. What can the community do to help its people skill up to deal with the changes that are going to hit them? Right. So it does require, I think, local government to work closely with the educational institutions that are available to it, like the Maharishi University in your case, community colleges, high schools, and have employers who still don't know what this is going to do, but give their best answer. Because again, we're talking local here. We don't have to solve the world's problems. We believe very strongly that it's very, very hard to solve problems up at the national level. It's almost as hard to solve them at the state level, but you get down to the level of cities and regions and counties, you got a shot at it. And of course, if you do enough of that, you solve the other problems. So I think, turning to your employer base, turning to the people who are actually trying to figure it out themselves and asking them, well, what's going to help you? Is the way to approach this. But I don't think any of us really know. I have years and years and years ago when computer networking first became something that was cheap and affordable that you could do at home. I looked at it and I thought, nah, I don't want to do that. Nah, forget about it. I don't need to do that. Well, that lasted about 6 months. And I'm doing the same thing with AI. It's like I'll wait until they put it into my products, and they are now. So now I'm now an AI guy. Um, but I guess that's a very wandering answer. But I really do think it comes down to not giving into the hype cycle, not saying, "Oh my God, it's going to be completely different from anything that's ever gone before." And the answer is it won't.
Well, yeah,
It won't. So how do we adapt to change?
Good.
great.
Other questions?
The other question I had is regarding the political divide in this country and getting people to the table. Of course, having a smart community initiative sounds like it reaches across hopefully all political situations. But given that communities are divided, what has been the experience in getting people together? Uh, what kind of things can we do that are low-hanging fruit that have been successful in other small towns?
That's a great question. And hoping my mental database is going to be equal to it. These days we have enough information that when people ask me a question like that, I think I'll get back to you on that one. I think that the key to this is, and I hope this isn't too obvious an answer, we're divided when we stop being people to each other, right? We're divided when I can turn you into an abstraction. And the whole point of our movement in the Intelligent Community Forum is to say, no, no, this is about the folks first. So, where are the folks today? And if in your community, if there is a general resistance to, I'll pick something. There's a general resistance to the idea that we need to, what's there a general? Help me out here. What would be a general thing that would spring up in your community that would get people a little hot under the collar?
Yeah, so that's a really good question back to us. What does divide us? What are the issues that we're aware
Yeah,
of?
two-way roads.
Two-way road. Oh, now there you go, buddy.
Okay, two-way roads.
We have one-way roads around our square, which completely beggars a great number of our
Retailers?
stores and everything. And two-way roads, we've done. How many studies have we done showing that two-way streets will be great? We've done the studies. But still, people, that those two-way streets is, So yeah, that's a real thing here.
Of course. Okay. So what is the impact of the one-way streets? Is it on your retail community?
Economic development people, please help me out. Here, Ed Malloy, head of FIDA.
Hi, Robert. Ed Malloy with Grow Fairfield, the Economic Development Association, and former mayor. I'm going to answer the question for you.
Thank you.
For our
Take
community.
pity on him, right?
Right. The thing is, there really aren't, a lot of dividing lines in the area of workforce and community building.
Right.
There just isn't. This is the place. This is our refuge for the commonality of a community and that wants to see itself, be its best. So I don't believe that there is, dividing lines. I think outside of workforce, outside of community building, outside of education, of course, inside education, we know where there are differences as well. But in general, the desire to provide the best education for our children is something that we share in a very strong way, a common bond there. So I don't really believe that's an issue. I don't think that the polarized national political reality is something that really gets to the ground level here. We're sort of, and I think you can appreciate this, we're too busy working on the good stuff to think about our divisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll make one quick comment there. Yeah, okay. Good. So I was on the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center board years ago when we had to buy out a USDA loan. It was like really a tough situation. And in years past, when the university came here in 1972, they were first welcomed, then we were weird, and then there was a lot of kind of town and gown issues that were more perception rather than reality. That softened as economic development came in a big way. How many, Ed, you said at one point when we didn't have fiber, we didn't have DSL, we had like, 100 times the density of fax and telephone and everything lines of a little town like this. So we were all on the board, and some of us were TM meditators and some weren't, and some were thinking this way and that way. And one of the leading members who put a lot of money into the convention center opined this. He says, you know what? In Fairfield, whether we're laughing at each other or with each other, we somehow just make it work. That's been my perception, that somehow we just make it work.
I'll tell you a story. One occurred to me. Well, and thank you, Ed. Appreciate that insight. Um, there's a city called Hilliard in central Ohio, about 30,000 people, so it's big enough to have some resource, but still, got a very small management team. I think there's 4 or 5 people who basically run the city. Um, they had this issue. They had a lot of people in their community who really wanted them to build a rec center because they just did. They had a bunch of they had an older population that, wanted a place to go. They had a younger population that had kids that had wanted exercise opportunities. But the question is, where are you going to get the money for it? And so this is the kind of thing that could have been extremely divisive. If they'd gone out and said, we're going to spend all this money to do this, you could just see people standing up and marching and saying, no, you can't do that. You're going to bankrupt us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They ended up coming up with this very cunning solution. And I will say that advisedly because I don't think they'd like it if I describe that, but I thought it was cunning. They had a second problem. And they realized that if they put the two problems together, they might have a solution. In central Ohio, most of the cities there have a local income tax, and which is great because financial stability is incredible. In the local income tax in most of those cities is 7.5%. I could have that number wrong. And in Hilliard, it was 7%, just for legacy reasons. It just turned out that way. And that was a problem for them because anybody who lived in Hilliard and worked in another city paid 7.5%. But in Hilliard, they were supposed to be paying 7%. And so it was a real kind of economic development stumbling block for them. And so they came up with a campaign that said, we're going to build this incredible recreation and wellness center. And they consulted, oh my God, they consulted with everybody. They had a big Muslim population there. They made sure to have a prayer room and a cleansing station and all the things they wanted. It was a wonderful engagement effort. So that helped, of course. But what really made it go was they said, we're going to ask you to vote on a tax hike. We want to add 0.5% to the income tax. And the money that we raise is going to go to build this recreation and wellness center. Well, I mean, they worked for the vote. They worked hard, but passed overwhelmingly. The thing's probably, I think, has it opened yet when I was there? No, when I was there a year ago, they're still under construction. But they got way out ahead of this issue that could have been divisive and approached it from a completely different position. And so often when we do deal with divisive issues, it's kind of almost too late. It's already happened, right? And so now all we can do is damage control. But again, at the local level, you do have an opportunity to know what people think and to try to figure out a solution that kind of, instead of saying A or B, it's C.
Right.
And on C, people can agree. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, good answer. Other questions? Are there other questions?
Mandy, Joe,
Oh, Andrew's great for questions. Here you go.
okay.
So, given that we were 21 in the top 21, and knowing Bob well, and what would you say are low-hanging fruits to move forward into the top 7?
Good question, Craig.
Excellent question. What are the low-hanging fruits? Well, first of all, I mean, telling the whole story is everybody who does that. Sorry, let me start the sentence at a different place. My wife used to work for the College Board, which runs the SAT, and so I learned about the SAT as it went along, and there's a lot of test prep. You can take test prep courses from all these places, and the College Board did a big study and discovered that the only one thing improves your score, and that's taking the SAT. First time you take it, okay, fine. Take it the second time, you're going to walk in knowing a lot of things you didn't know about it, and you'll do better. So just doing it more than once helps. That Dutch community I mentioned a while back, they did it 7 times.
Yeah.
And each time they got better and better at telling their story, explaining what it was really about. And we get this information. We have a set of analysts, volunteer analysts that are from academia and business and a bunch of other places who read all these narrative questionnaires and score them. And so then, that's what decides it. But I also acquaint myself with it, and I often see things that I'm not sure the analysts saw. Um, so, the ways in which what I would like you guys to tell most of all is the ways in which, you know, Fairfield's governing the business of governing in Fairfield, which does not just take place among elected officials. That's one thing I know about you, how that model works.
Hmm.
Because I think it's something that is, again, it's a superpower of a small place, but it's also unique. You are uniquely good at it. There's a lot of places that have got 9 or 10,000 residents who are at war with each other. Um, and how does that sort of government plus work in Fairfield, and how did it arise? How does it produce results? And then some examples of it. How did this? I mean, I know that I'm going to get it wrong. You have is it an arts and culture center or something? But that was a
Yeah.
classic example
Yeah.
of that. But describing that mechanism, which I know is probably invisible to most people, would be, I think, something that would make a difference. Because you got a lot of boxes you can check. That's why you were in the Smart 21. But it really comes down to explaining to us what makes Fairfield, you know, different from every other place.
So, Robert, we've got our clue. If we don't make it this year, and we might,
You
if we
might,
don't
you might
make it,
not. I can't predict.
I
I
realize
also don't. I also don't get to decide. Just so you know.
yeah, you're not the yes and no guy. You guys don't do it. The reviewers, and you go with it. That is a major clue. But I can tell you, having been the person who put all of the narratives together, with a lot of help from a lot of you here, the first years relative to the one that we put in this year, like embarrassing. The second year
Good.
was better. And this year, I think, is even better. But had I had that particular insight, we might have done a little bit better kind of tying everything together, but we'll see. We'll see. If we don't make it, that'll be a major clue. So Ed Malloy again.
Robert, just to give a comment and a little insight on that, it is really one of our core strengths, but and I'm not sure we're still the work in progress for us is really making those interconnections more seamless inside the community. But the one thing that we are, I think, very strong in and very good at is that with all of those different areas of responsibility, we know that there is the same level of commitment, work ethic, and kind of cultural responsibility to the community, to that we all know sort of shoulder to shoulder is I don't even really need to check with my other economic development cohort with the Chamber of Commerce. I know what she's doing on a daily basis. I know what she represents. I know the kinds of conversations she's having. And she is also buoyed by the strength of our organization. And I think that runs throughout the community. And then if you're going to compare us to the number of boards and organizations that have taken some areas of responsibility, we're going to be we're going to be a little bit off the charts on that one as
Yeah.
well. So yeah, maybe telling that story in another way to kind of show that connectivity that exists, but also recognize that we're always working. That's a work in progress also to make that as strong as it can be, because we do have people with new ideas that get left out because there isn't the same amount of energy behind it at any given point.
No, that's a natural selection process. I really appreciate you saying that because, again, let me to drop another seed on you. One of the things you could tell us about is how does the system work in terms of accountability? You just described it, right? But that's not a usual description of accountability. that's a different one. And again, I find that very interesting.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Oh, yeah, keep okay. So one thing that a community this size with this set of proclivities allows is if I have a bright idea, I can just pick up the phone and call the current mayor. Say, Connie, can we have breakfast at 8 o'clock? I got an idea for you. And she'll come to breakfast. And if it's a good idea, and I never bring her bad ideas, she's never said no. And
Oh, sure you do.
listen, I curate my ideas. I do not like to hear no. I do not like to be rejected. But same thing we did. Ed and I worked, and as that is a general principle. Ed has described our community as a community of 1,000 passions. You can't organize that formally. You have to organize it as a complex interactive system. And we have part of our strength is that we're particularly good at allowing those interactive systems, those complex systems to interact with each other that creates unusual effects that we don't squish down because there's just a little bit more openness to ideas in the general community. So we're not that much better at a lot of these things, but if we're only using 2% of our potential and we start using 3%, we're up 50%. So that, I think, is an explanation of where we get our edge.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Robert, thank you very, very much for your insight. This is a fascinating initiative that you are helping spearhead, and I know this community has greatly appreciated and value the exercise itself and looks forward to be getting smarter and smarter and smarter with each iteration. So let's give Robert a quick round of appreciation.